Welcome to Pop Crime TV's The Outlier podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Conlin, and today I am beyond excited to interview one of the most influential voices in documentary filmmaking, specifically in the true crime genre, Joe Berlinger. Joe is an Academy Award nominee. Gosh, he's an 8-time Emmy Award nominee and the recipient of countless accolades, including wins at the Sundance Film Festival. And Joe has just been at the forefront of true crime filmmaking for over 3 decades. He has directed shows like Paradise Lost Trilogy, which actually helped free the West Memphis 3, and to chart-topping Netflix series like Conversations with the Killer and Madoff, the Monster of Wall Street. But now, Joe has turned his lens to one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in American history, the 1996 murder of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. In his latest Netflix docuseries, Cold Case, Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, which is out November 25th, I'm actually really upset I did not get a private screener like they usually send out. I cannot wait for this. Joe revisits the chilling events of that fateful Christmas and the years of media frenzy, public suspicion, and law enforcement missteps that followed. I'm assuming many of you remember the 1996 day after Christmas that JonBenét was found dead in her basement by her family, and her family was immediately under suspicion for a number of reasons. They have been cleared by the police since. There have been some lawsuits because there was finger pointing towards them. And look, the finger pointing was because of many, quote, coincidences within what police were finding and putting out there. And I believe that Joe Berlinger, his documentary is really going to clear the Ramseys. And he tells me all about why. And I kind of said to him in the interview, I'm like, look, I don't get why this makes sense. I don't get why this wasn't looked into. I don't know how you explain this type of stuff. And he was very stern. He was like, I don't understand why you wouldn't look at this. And I'm like, okay. So it was a great conversation. But just to refresh your memory, there was this undigested pineapple in JonBenét's system. And a lot of us looking at this case are like, would a cold-blooded pedophile murderer give their child victim pineapple if they asked for it? Or is somebody more likely to give it to her if they're close to her or if they know her? Or was JonBenét more comfortable asking for it because she knew this person? That's one very strange thing about this case that a lot of us haven't been able to get over. And then the ransom note was very odd. It was on Patsy Ramsey's legal pad, and there was the use of the word attaché, which is a French word, very random in the note. And Patsy Ramsey had a fascination with French words, hence she named her daughter JonBenét, and the family dog's name was Jacques. That's just odd. I guess it could be coincidental. Who knows? And then there was the fact that Patsy lied and said that Beau, JonBenét's brother, was not awake when the 911 call was actually slowed down. At the end, you heard Beau's voice, so he actually was awake. I don't know why she lied. I have no idea. Maybe she was nervous. That's just something that people have brought up. And by the way, I have never, ever thought that the 9-year-old brother did it, Beau. I think that's crazy. But there also was JonBenét's autopsy report, and many experts have battled over this one section. So it read that JonBenét had chronic inflammation of the vagina, and chronic means consistent. So what does that mean? Could that mean sexual abuse, chronic sexual abuse? Because it also was stated that JonBenét was brought to the pediatrician over 30 times in 3 years, and she had UTIs, urinary tract infections, at age 6. So those two things combined are also very strange. I mean, after your kid is 3 years old, you're really only required to take them once a year for a well visit. Maybe you factor in some additional times for sicknesses like strep or the flu, whatever. So at most, I guess JonBenét could see the doctor 5 times a year, including a well visit, but you have double that over 3 years. So it's strange. I've just never been able to, I guess, get over some of this stuff because it hasn't really been explained away to me. There also was the fact that uh, when a grand jury was convened to indict the Ramseys, allegedly the DA's office actually lied and said that the grand jury did not want to indict them when they did. I don't know how you explain that away. Again, I'm not implicating anyone. I just don't understand a lot of this, and I would like to understand this. So again, I do push back a little bit on Joe, and he definitely checks me. And look, he is such an amazing and skillful director and also researcher. I mean, he has gotten people released from prison that are innocent. So he does great work. And I think really what he's trying to do here is clear the Ramseys and put pressure on the Boulder police to do this DNA testing. And at the beginning of the interview, I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, of course, John Ramsey is pushing for DNA testing. I don't necessarily think that matters because he would be ruled out. I mean, he already legally is ruled out, but he would be ruled out because he lived with JonBenét. If his DNA is found on her clothes or anything, relating to her, it wouldn't really matter. But Joe actually tells me something that I had no idea about what they need to test DNA wise. And it's actually very, very important. And I believe, yeah, if they get this testing done, that we might be able to figure out who killed JonBenét. And it makes a whole lot of sense to me now after speaking to him. So I will stop talking and you can listen to my interview and you will be able to understand what I'm talking about as well. And stick around because after I have a few more things to say and I will close this out. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
I've really been looking forward to speaking with you. I first of all, I have to say, sometimes I get the screeners for things that are coming up, and in this case, I have been waiting for this docuseries. I was so mad I didn't get a screener, but I gotta ask you, what drew you to revisit this case?
A couple of things drew me to why I want to tell the story. First and foremost, I think the crime can be solved. Um, there's some basic DNA testing that needs to be done that the Boulder police, which I think horribly mishandled this case, uh, there's steps they need to take. And even though most of the people from the original investigation are gone, and even though there's a new police chief in Boulder, and even though they claim that they're doing the right steps and following every lead, and they claim that they can't talk about the case because it's an open investigation 28 years later,
Yeah.
uh, you know, they're just not doing what needs to be done. And there's some basic DNA testing that I think would, lead us to the right conclusion. Um,
Okay.
in
Okay.
in part because in, in part because DNA technology has changed drastically since this case first happened. And if you want me to go into what I think needs to happen, I will. You want to
Yeah.
ask me another question?
No, I
No
mean,
problem.
I do. I want to get into that because I've seen John Ramsey yap about the DNA testing and whatnot. And I'm not pointing fingers at the Ramseys. There are so many things. I've done some deep dives into this case and I take such issue with a number of things. I mean, Joe, for example, if you do DNA testing, you can easily explain away any DNA that belongs to him, meaning John Ramsey, because he lived with her. And again, I'm not necessarily pointing fingers because I don't need a lawsuit on my hands, but I just still have trouble with the pineapple found in her system. I have trouble with the French words in the notes. I have trouble with some of the lies that were told. I have trouble with the lie, about the grand jury not wanting to indict them. I take a lot of, I don't know. There's a lot that just doesn't make sense to me, and I would like to see that explained.
Well, I think you need to watch the show because I have the exact opposite view of you. Yeah, I think there are, if you turn the rock. First of all, DNA testing is the way to go. I mean, like this thought that it'll exonerate the Ramseys is that's kind of illogical. You need to do DNA testing to point to a perpetrator, and if they're the first, they've been pushing for DNA. They're not charged with this crime, and they've already been officially pardoned. So the Ramseys pushing, and the guy at 80 years old still pushing for DNA testing is only a positive sign in my mind that this guy is still pushing, and DNA testing is the way to go.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I do.
As you probably know, I mean, you should know, I think the Ramseys are unequivocally innocent, that they were brutalized by a myopic Boulder police that locked into preconceived idea based on feelings and not evidence, and they dismissed anything that didn't confirm that bias. And I specialize in wrongful conviction cases. Yeah. I've gotten 6 people out of prison over the years, not just the West Memphis 3, but I've affected 3 other cases, and I've studied many, many wrongful conviction cases. And I think the Ramsey case shares a lot of attributes with classic wrongful conviction. Obviously, they weren't legally convicted, but they were convicted by the court of public opinion.
Right.
And what you see in wrongful conviction cases all the time is a myopic police force that is overwhelmed by the crime at hand because they've never seen anything like it, which is true in Boulder. And they lock into a preconceived idea, and they can't move off of it. And because it's human nature to not be able to admit a mistake. But worse, in this instance, they fed false and incomplete stories to the press and fanned the flame of this national obsession that somehow the parents are guilty. And I think that was criminal. And, if you turn the rock over on anybody's life or on any case, any wrongful conviction case, there are hard to explain unless you know the full story factors, like the pineapple, like some of the cited. But unless there is corroborating evidence, those things are just tantalizing factors that could go either way. So what you have to focus on is the significant, indisputable facts. And to me, if you just boil it down to the autopsy report, she died while living. She had petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, petechial hemorrhaging in the heart. That means she was strangled. She was found with a garrote tied around her neck, and there are red marks where you see the fingers. You don't see the fingers, but those red marks are from her fingers trying to pry the garrote loose so that she could breathe.
Yeah.
So this is how the girl died. If we want to think that over a bedwetting incident, that the mother had the presence of mind to bring her child down to the basement, fashion a garrote around her neck, and choke her, then release, which is how she died, then anyone who thinks that needs to really rethink how they're thinking about the case. To think, the pineapple theory is ludicrous because the idea that Burke did it is ludicrous. I mean, this 9-year-old did not.
Yeah, no, I never actually believed what you just said. I never thought that was plausible. I don't believe in coincidences, and I really do still have so many questions about this case. And it's unfortunate because I don't have a lot of time with you, because I really could talk to you about this forever. And I don't know if you believe in statement analysis and these deception experts, but they've also done deep dives into a lot of different statements, and it's fascinating. And again, I understand you can't put all your eggs into that, right? And determine if someone's guilty just based on that. But I'm just really hoping that when I watch this, I'm going to learn new information about the case, and it will change my mind, hopefully, because I'm waiting for that, Joe. I really am waiting for that.
Watch the show. Unfortunately, a lot of these analyses you're talking about are not foolproof, wouldn't be
Hmm.
entered into a court of law, and so therefore they sometimes help and point in a direction, but they can also point in a false direction. You have to follow the evidence. The evidence is that this girl was tortured to death while she was living, and
Right.
that destroys most of the theories that the Ramseys were responsible for it. And even the police and the grand jury investigator ruled out Burke as a suspect. So anything relating to Burke is just a non-starter.
Yeah.
Uh, anything related to the parents, you have to focus on the actual forensic evidence, and the idea that we shouldn't be testing the DNA. Like, I don't know where you got that idea from.
No, it's
There's a
not
very
that.
there's a there's a
Yeah.
very let me just tell you so your listeners can understand. There's
Mm.
one thing needs to happen, and that is the only DNA in this case was a mixed sample of male unidentified DNA in her underpants mixed with her blood in her underwear because she was violated vaginally
Hmm.
and with an object. And so there's her blood mixed with male DNA. It's a
Oh.
very minimal profile, very minimal sample because of the mixture. There is now technology in which you can separate out the male DNA with JonBenét's own DNA. The technology now exists, and the Boulder police has not done that yet in 28 years. And
Oof.
because of the advances in genealogical DNA
Mm.
testing, 20, which has been a huge tool in solving crimes lately, solving cold cases. I believe that if they did this testing and that DNA profile of the male foreign DNA was fed into genealogical testing, there is a good chance that the family of this perpetrator might be identified. It's a huge
Okay.
database.
That is much different. I did not know they had that. I thought it was based, if you can understand my view, I thought it was based on fingerprints, whatever was found on her clothing. I had no idea that that is what could be tested. And I agree with you. That's very important. Joe, yeah, thank you so much for your time. Again, I could talk to you forever. I'm being told I have to jump, but I hope I wasn't offensive in any way. I love having this conversation with you. I'm very open-minded and so excited to watch the
Cool.
JonBenét cold case docuseries.
Sounds good. All right.
Thank you. All right, that was Joe Berlinger, and he was great. I mean, he really put me in my place. And I think that many of you guys know, if you listen to my podcast or you watch me on YouTube or wherever, I am really open minded. I might have strong opinions on something, but if I'm shown evidence and proof, I will I will take that into consideration, and I am always open to changing my opinion or my mind on stuff. And I did not know that that is the DNA testing that they wanted completed. And that's really important. I agree. And also, I need to just put it out there. Obviously, I agree DNA testing is the most important thing. I mean, gosh, there have been so many wrongfully convicted people from the 70s, 80s, 90s, when there wasn't DNA testing available because of just one crappy witness that said, "Oh, I saw this person do XYZ," and that's just ruined lives. So, yes, I 100% agree that DNA testing is important. I think that with this case, the JonBenét case in particular, I'm a little touchy about it because I just have some things in my head. But I did not know this is what they wanted tested. The blood and the substance in her underwear. I think that needs to be done. I really do. And maybe this will be kind of like the Menendez brothers era, where these documentaries do push law enforcement to do more with these specific cases. I also want to point out that John Ramsey did an interview with People magazine. You know, this happens when these docuseries are about to drop. We start to see them in the headlines, or people involved in the cases in the headlines. And he has a speculation about a possible suspect that he claims the Boulder police never looked into. He said that there was a 12-year-old girl that lived about 2 miles away from them in Boulder, Colorado, that 9 months after JonBenét's murder, this masked intruder snuck inside the home of this 12-year-old girl 2 miles away and raped her. And the mother of the girl, quote, scared away this rapist when she burst into the room and saved her daughter. And John Ramsey said, quote, "To me, it could easily have been the same person. The police blew it off as, no, it's not the same." Now, he also calls this rapist, quote, a killer. And I thought that was very interesting. So in this article with People magazine, he says, quote, "I think the method of operation was exactly the same." He then goes on to say that in the case of the 12-year-old girl and her family, quote, "They came home, set the burglar alarm, and the killer was already in the house. A very similar method, and yet the police blew it all off. It was the same investigator as our case," end quote. I mean, it could just be a slip, but he did call this rapist of the 12-year-old girl a killer, and the girl did not die. So again, it could be a slip, but it seems interesting that he is referring to the masked intruder as a killer when that's just not proven. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. This also kind of reminds me of the Scott Peterson theory, where they're like, oh, well, police never looked into the burglary next door. And the police said, well, we did. So I don't know enough about this masked intruder in this case with the 12-year-old girl to say that the police did or did not look into it. But I did find that to be interesting. And at the end of the article, the People article, he says, John Ramsey says, quote, "But yes, I think that was very possibly the same person." The words "I think" and "very possibly" seem non-committal, and he's really not sure. But yeah, I get it. The guy lost his daughter in a horrific manner. He's been looked at as a suspect, and I'm sure he just wants to know the truth at this point. I can't help but just feel so uneasy about all of the weird coincidences in this case. And again, I would like them explained away to me. And I am so willing to stand there and say, oh my gosh, I was wrong. This was a coincidence and that was a coincidence. I want to see proof and I want to see evidence. So again, thank you all for listening to the Outlier podcast. The JonBenét Cold Case docuseries will premiere on Netflix on November 25th, and I am so looking forward to it. And if you guys like this podcast, don't forget to rate and subscribe on Apple or wherever you listen. I'll be back next week with brand new episodes.